Welcome today. I have Duane from Project Medtech. I'm so excited to talk to him. Hi, Duane. How are you today? What's going on with you?
Not too much, Stacy. Thanks for having me. It's uh
Of
it's
course.
always fun being on the other side of the interviews.
Yeah, I bet it is. Um, for those of you who don't know, Duane is one of the founders of Project Medtech. And we're basically going to talk to him about Project Medtech today, how it was founded, trends he's seen, how his business developed through the trends that they've seen, and just where they are in space at the moment. So they've got a lot of really cool things going on, and I'm super excited to talk about all those super cool things. Duane, tell me a little bit about the early beginnings of Project Medtech. Like, how did you keep the lights on? Like, tell me a little bit about your founder story, how you all came together.
Yeah. So I was at a previous company in the medtech space from 2015 to April of 2020. And so when I was there, I had the opportunity to learn a lot of different areas of medtech innovation. It was a really great company to work for. I got into business development there, and getting into business development, you get to talk to clients a lot. And so I started to, talk to startups a lot, start to realize, hey, there's a lot of problems that the company I was at doesn't necessarily solve for. So I had this idea for this company. Um, and it was a terrible time to have an idea for a company. It would have been, it was like February of 2020. I'm like, oh, this is great. I have this idea here. Let's go run with it. And then, middle of March, the world shuts down for COVID. The first week of April, my wife's like, hey, guess what? I'm pregnant with our first kid. And at the end of April, I don't have a job necessarily at my previous company. And so that's like a really stressful period. So I launched the company as a podcast at the time. I went back and worked at another company doing business development in the clinical trial space. And then for the next 18 months, let the media side of Project MedTech grow. So we started with this podcast, and it was a great way to build an ecosystem, connect with people, but share information with the industry. And it was selfishly for me, it was really great because I learned a ton. But also it was nice to do something for the industry, put these awesome conversations out there. You've been on the podcast before,
Mhm.
and it was a lot of fun. So my first co-founder came on in November of 2020. Second one came on in May of 2021. So Aaron Ten Houston was first, Rich Mazzola was second. They each brought a area of the business that wasn't my skill set. Rich is a finance and operations person, and Aaron is operations as well. And so yeah, from there, we just kind of scaled into what Project MedTech is today.
That's amazing. So I know from having a small business and starting it, and you do too. What I love to tell people or talk about is like in your beginnings and your goals for the beginning, was it the same as it is now? So, for example, when you kicked off the Project MedTech podcast, what was the specific goal behind the podcast, and how did that, how did you learn from that podcast and then turn Project MedTech into the actual business that it is today? Because those are two different things, right? So, like, I think that you guys started with the original goal of just having a podcast, which morphed itself into an actual larger business, which, helps startups get off the ground and things like that. So, how did that start, and then what did it merge into, and how did you come up with those ideas based on what you were learning from Project MedTech podcast?
Yeah. Yeah. I think at microscopic levels, the
Hmm.
evolution, it looks like a lot, right?
Right.
Even at a layer above that, it still looks like there's been quite a bit of evolution. From a big picture, we do this from time to time. We go back and look at our Miro board, which was like a virtual whiteboard, right? But it was just easy for us to collaborate on, even though most conversations happen just the room over at my kitchen table. We had this Miro board. If you went and looked at that, the big picture items are almost the same as what we talked about in 2020, of where we wanted to go. How we got there certainly has evolved and changed. it's gotten the way in which we're supporting the ecosystem has evolved as well and gotten cleaner, and we're able to do more things. But at a high level, I mean, we wanted to make networking easier, educate, and consult, right? And we're doing all of those things still. It's just the vehicle in which we do that is maybe no longer a Chevy Cobalt, and maybe we've upgraded to whatever the next car is, right? And so that's kind of how I look at it. But big picture wise, a lot of it's very similar to what we intended to do.
So, since it's similar, did you find through like the podcast and the reaching out to other, like building this network that you've created, what kind of trends did you see and how did those trends reinforce your, like, I want to call them initial pillars of the business that you're creating and have created?
hmm Yeah, I think one of the big trends we saw is you don't have to, especially with startups, right? Is a lot of people thought there was this idea that, well, if you give away too much information, then they don't need you. And that's not the case. It's actually, if you give away a lot of information, they just come more educated to you and understand they need you. I also think that one of the big macro trends that Project MedTech is kind of built on is that there's an opportunity to fractionalize your team at a very early stage, and you should do that. Um, One, it reduces the capital that you need to raise at an early stage, so it protects the founder and early stage investors a little bit and preserves some of that equity. And two, it's just not needed, right? There's a lot of talent that you can go, use and bring to your team and get, A+ level talent in a way that you can turn off and on as you need that individual. Because that's the other piece of this is it all sounds great to say, okay, hey, we want to go hire a full-time regulatory and quality person. Well, what happens when the FDA sends a letter back and now you're delayed 60 days to your submission date, and that capital burn rate carries on 3 months extra
Yeah.
than what you thought? That's a real problem. And there's a lot of companies that could face some serious issues that way. And so that was like a big thing that I had seen that just said, hey, we want to solve for, right? If you want to go raise a ton of money and hire a full-time team, definitely go do that. But for all the other companies that, hey, maybe there's a way to get to commercialization a little bit cheaper before I hire a full-time team, that's kind of what Project MedTech's consulting division is there to support. Yeah.
Yeah, so I agree with you. Fractionalized workforce is pretty much a big trend in the marketplace. Like I know so many people who've worked across multiple industries and they've started their own consulting firms and they've realized that just fractionalizing part of their, I want to say expertise to multiple companies has been what they're seeing in the market as well. Because so many people actually need so many different things. Like to bring a product to market in the medical space, let's just be honest, you need regulatory pathways, you need to understand manufacturing, you need to understand post-market data, you need to understand human factors, the clinical aspect, if you have hardware and software validation and verification. I mean, there's just a lot to do in the medical space. And so if you can fractionalize that workforce and not have to have a core team meeting every week, or, you can pay like partial core team. That's like a huge deal. So I've seen it across the board in so many different industries too, not just, medical, but yeah, I think that's a really awesome trend. Have you noticed anything else that has kind of skewed your business what am I trying to say? To offer additional things? Like we talked about fractionalization of, individual team members. What else have you seen?
Yeah, I think, one of the areas that we've taken a big step in. So within our consulting, we do a lot of fractional finance work, CFO, bookkeeping, fundraising strategies, all of that. Operationally, quality, regulatory, not, we don't do the contract manufacturing, but just supply chain logistics, manufacturing, picking, that kind of stuff. That was always there. Reimbursement was always there on our commercial side. But the one piece that we found that we just maybe weren't as aware of, and that we kind of doubled down on, is that 365 view of commercialization. So on our team, we have a health economist, reimbursement expert who says, hey, yeah, this is the CPT code you fall under, this is the DRG code. We also added two hospital executives to our team, so Jamie Easterling and Sean McGibbon, and they Sean is a former hospital executive. Jamie was a hospital executive, worked with us, and now he does both again. His feedback into, yeah, that is the DRG code that we get paid for on this product, but this is how it actually works and how the hospital makes money. That's another level of, as you're trying to figure out your commercial strategy and how you're going to fit, something you need to be, it is really important. And the other thing they give us is other stakeholder analysis. So that's great. Now you know how you need to pitch the value analysis committee within a hospital. Well, how does the product actually get ordered, right? How does supply chain order this? How does it get stocked? And they give us insights to all that. And then we have a team of 1099s that are sales folks within different strategic organizations and other startup companies that kind of give us good real world feedback of how they get into a hospital. But all of this at a very, very early stage is important. Like, people used to talk about, hey, your regulatory needs to be lined up with your reimbursement. I think it's actually a larger step than that. It's regulatory needs to be lined up with your full commercial strategy. And you have to, it doesn't have to be fully baked. There's way more to a commercialization strategy, but you better know your economic value for all the stakeholders in the ecosystem, because it's super complicated. So that kind of merger is like a trend I see.
That's interesting. So, just for the people who don't understand or have never heard of this part of the world that we live in, the DRG code is basically the code that you send to Medicare, Medicaid, and any of your insurance companies to get money back for the hospital. That's the correct thing, right?
That's right. Yep.
So it's how these businesses in the medical industry get refunded by the insurance, basically. And so they're very important, because if you don't have the right code, you're not going to get refunded appropriately. And if you're coming to market with the wrong code, you may not make it to market. So those are really big buckets of things that I think are really interesting to consider in the medical device industry. So moving on from that. So because of those trends, like, I mean, I've seen corporations who've, originally thought that their code was going to be X, and they were like, wow, we can't even get to market with that. We have to do a different code. And so they'll work with their strategists to figure out like what the code could be and how to get repaid. And I think that that's, especially for startups, like, if you don't know your market placement, you're going to have a hard time getting product market fit into the correct location. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, and building on that, Stacy, too, maybe this is another I don't know if it's a trend, but maybe a piece of advice for companies. You know, startup life is hard as it is. What makes a successful commercialization launch, or a company getting through the gauntlet of taking a med device to market and actually being successful with it, you are going to have your plan to get to the top of Mount Everest. The conditions in which in which you take this, this journey, are going to change. It's your ability to plan, execute the plan, modify the plan, and then re-execute it. I mean, that is, I like when investors on our podcast always like, well, we're betting on the team. That's what they mean. Like, they are betting on, there are so many really cool products that we see on a day-to-day basis at Project Medtech. It's very rare that a cool product is what actually gets to market. It's the team that's executing this plan, changing the plan, adapting the plan. That I can't undersell that. That's such an important piece of the picture that people don't think about.
No, I completely agree. I've seen really awesome products not make it too. And I've seen
Yeah.
just kind of cool, okay products, but like the people that are working behind it are efficient. They're willing to change. They're willing to modify plans. They're willing to be malleable. And those are the teams that I also, big industry, small industry, I see those teams getting to market much faster. Even in the big corporations, which I don't think that people realize, at least the ones that I've worked at. Some of the stuff that comes out of them comes out of incubators.
Hmm.
So there's like a small little team that kind of creates this concept, and then they bring it to the business at large and they have a business plan. And then that business plan may or may not get funded by the large company. And that then you do all the development, the research and development, and the strongest teams are the ones that were willing to pivot on the design, pivot on the pathway, pivot with, the board of directors. I mean, you just have to be really malleable. And so I've seen successes and I've seen failures both on a large scale with large companies and small companies with the exact same thing. I just didn't articulate it or notice it until you just said that. So
Hmm.
that's really cool. That's a really
Yeah.
cool, like, not even just advice, it's just a good pathway. I think in today's environment, you kind of have to be either willing to be fractionalized if you're a consultant, or you have to be able to pivot with a team and be like, okay, well, here's all the things that I did. Let me just change all that immediately and like let's just move forward. Like it's not it, and I don't think that people should take things personally. It has nothing to do with us. It's just like, okay, well, this is what happened now. Let's move on. Like, can't do anything about it. Why are we talking about it anymore? Like, let's just move on.
Yeah,
So
I do think, Stacy, that a lot of this stems from like Shark Tank. I think Shark Tank has ruined innovation for people because like they
that's
see
so
they
funny.
see successes on there and they're like, "Oh, they must have been the first one to think of a video camera doorbell." And it's like, I don't know if Ring was the first one to think of that. I doubt it. I bet they had a lot of competitors, but what they did do is execute a plan a lot better than everybody else, right? It's the same thing with like phones. I mean, everyone has an iPhone. I don't think any tech person is like, yeah, the iPhone's the best phone you can have. Most people have iPhones. So
Yeah.
again, they must have executed at a much higher level than everybody else.
Yeah, there was something that happened because iPhone, like just the trend of iPhone, like the people that I knew that had Blackberries, absolutely. I'm so
Hmm.
aging myself right now, but my friends love their Blackberry, especially for
Hmm.
work, because you could have that tactile feedback of like typing on an actual keyboard. And they were like, I don't want to adopt the iPhone. And now they all have iPhones. So
They
I'm just
have
saying, like,
iPhones. Right.
there's no
Yeah.
more, there's no more
Yeah.
Blackberry.
That's
Like,
right. That's right. My wife had one.
yeah. Okay, good. I'm like, I don't know how old this is making me right now.
Yeah.
So back to Project Medtech,
Yeah.
and you guys actually just started as a podcast. It wasn't like
Hmm.
a business. So what when did you pivot and turn it into like what it is now? Because I think what people see now is 5 years later, the symposiums that you have, the reach
Hmm.
out, the network, the like, but what they don't see is the struggle, because the struggle is real for every startup. And
Hmm.
technically you're almost not a startup anymore, but I think anything under 10 years old is technically a startup in my opinion. So walk me through that pivot. Like how did you guys decide to make that pivot, and like where
Yeah.
did that idea come from?
Yeah, again, we had the idea. It was mostly, when do we take this risk, right? And knowing that, we were going to bootstrap it, that added the complication to it, right? And so it was a, constant. Yeah, we weren't doing anything to help us, right? Because like we started in 2020. My oldest daughter was born December of 2020. And then we go through 2021 and the momentum was clear. And so, I went for full time in January of 22. And then my two other co-founders, Aaron and Rich, came full time in August and September of 22. And a lot of the conversation, was around, we surrounded ourselves with some advisors that could really help us think through this and pushed us when we thought of something. It was like they were pushing us to go full time. And then once we said, "Hey, I think I'm going to do it," they said, "Well, are you sure?" Like we surrounded ourselves with people who questioned our decisions and didn't just say, like, "Yeah, you should go do it," but they really cared about us as individuals. And I think that was a big, big step for us. But, kind of going through that and saying, I mean, it was definitely a stressful time, um, to say, "Hey," I told my wife I want to go full time into Project Medtech. And this is also, I omitted this part of the story. Um, Coming out of COVID, so our daughter was born December 16th, 2020. In March of 21, my wife went back to work and was laid off as a physical therapist from her
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
So, 2021 was a turbulent year for us trying to figure all that out. And then at the end of the year, October, I'm like, hey, guess what? I want to go full time in 2022. So,
She's like,
you know,
awesome, great,
yeah,
okay.
this is great, and it's like, well, how much are you going to get paid? And it's like, I don't know yet, and so 2022 and 2023 were, yeah, it is stressful times. People don't talk about this. You're 100% right. I'm pretty open about it. I've shared on other podcasts. The strain is stressful for you as an individual. It's stressful for you and your co-founders. It's stressful for your close family and friends. I mean, it's a very stressful period. The stress doesn't stop. It just changes and it morphs into other
Something
stresses.
else, yeah.
Yeah, something else. But it is a really interesting time, and it's not for everybody, and but it's totally worth it.
Yeah, I
Like,
agree.
I don't regret any of it, and you know this, right? And so yeah, I mean, it was interesting, but we decided to do it in 2022, and we just felt like, hey, there's enough initial clients where we can live and start to build this, because it's not going to build itself.
No, you just sometimes have to jump in and make that decision. And
That's it.
I think that when you make the decision, things just kind of come to you. Like, I mean, not immediately, but you'll see like a trickle, then you'll see a bit of a stream, and then like all of a sudden you have a dam, and you're like, where did this dam come from? I'm so not ready for this. This was not
Hmm.
this. I mean, I'm happy, but I wasn't like ready. And then you
Yep.
just like kind of like what we were talking about, pivot and adjust, and like the more malleable you are, and then the more your business evolves with you. So as you stated, the first year I didn't even pay myself. I didn't. Right? Like there was no way I could pay myself. Second year, I brought somebody on, and it was like really funny because she was like also got like let go from her job. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to figure out how to pay her, but I'm going to. Like, it's just going to
Hmm.
happen. And it happened. And since then, like, she's been working with me and she's been, I've been able to pay her. Like, so that's
Yeah.
really great. And same
Hmm.
with me. Like, I have had enough business to pay two people, possibly three, like, depending on like the ebb and flow of what goes on. And that's just kind of like, you have to be willing to take the risk to get the reward. And it may not be everything that you wanted at the moment that you want it, but then it builds and then it builds and then it builds. And you're like, okay, well, things are better. Things are better. Do I feel stressed out? Yeah, of course I do. But
Hmm.
everything works itself out if you just decide that it's going to work itself out. And I think that's what you guys as Project Medtech decided. It's like, we started this podcast. Okay, now we're going to work full time on it. Okay, we did that. And now we're going to generate more income. We're going to create a network. We're going to create a business. And then it's going to work. And then it worked. Right?
Yeah. 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 And I think, you're talking about bringing on team members. The stresses, um, when we first started, when it was just the three of us, was different in the sense of like, hey, if this doesn't work out, it's affecting me and my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I can maybe stomach that a little bit more in a weird way. When we started bringing on team members, the stress went definitely higher, because it was, well, now we're growing and scaling, and if this doesn't work, we're affecting a lot more people. And no matter what anyone says, like, I always hear the term, it's just business. Oh, well, they don't care about you.
That's not
Maybe
true
that
with
is,
small
yeah, maybe
business.
that is true at some other companies. That has not been my experience. And, like, everyone's like, oh, that'll be the case. And it's like, no, like, every person that walks through that door. And now we're at the point where they used to report to me, they don't anymore. I still care about them immensely. And you worry, that's always a constant worry of like, okay, things are going really well right now. What happens if they don't? And you think about that constantly, and the downstream effects of that. Yeah, that it's just business has not been my experience. Or there are, and even with our clients, and maybe that's in the startup life, it's just different too. But I feel like I have personal relationships, with our clients, our startups. You talk to these founders every day, you feel a connection to them, the employees that work at Project Medtech that are working with the clients. I feel like I have such close connections with them. It is not just business.
No, I don't think it is either. And the interesting thing about Project MedTech and what I was drawn to when I first spoke to both of you and Aaron was like the fact that we're just kind of similar human beings and on the same page about what we want to build in the environment. So I know this is a little off topic, but let's talk about that, because we're kind of in that vein of like, I know that in the world that I'm working in, I'm creating a space where the people that are working with me now are like my core. And we talk about how we want the business to evolve, how we want it to grow, what types of things we want to do. And our year-end planning this year is going to reflect more of that than how do you think you did on this task? Like we're not task-based. We're not talking about those things. And I'm trying to build an environment that's very different from the corporate world that I came from, because it wasn't a happy place. And a lot of my friends who work in corporate right now, they're not what I would consider to be thrilled. Like there's been a lot of change policies since COVID. Like everybody was originally like, go home, you can work remote. Then the return to work has forced a lot of people to sell their homes, move to different places. They've taken a loss. Like, and none of these corporations are considering, and well, they probably are. And they probably just like the decisions at the top are made at the decisions in the top. I'm not going to say people don't care. I'm just going to say it's a different thought process and a different environment. So I know a lot of my friends are just like, this isn't what I signed up for. How is this okay? And I'm looking at this and I'm like, I don't ever want to live in a world like that ever again. So I'm building something very different. And when I met you guys, I felt like we all connected, because I feel like that's something that you're creating too. So can you talk a little bit about the evolution of like just the three of you and now your team, and like what that looks like and the environment that you're creating in your space?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, for us, we have a mission and vision. We have, a very clear, just set of values and principles and culture we want to have. But I think, for us, the one thing that we've always made very clear, and it's why I think the growth has gone really well, is, hey, we want to create an ecosystem where medtech companies can thrive. We want to improve patient lives with the medtech technologies that go to market. Um, and as long as we are doing that with network, our education, consulting, and other things, we have a parallel fund on the side as well that we can actually invest in some companies now. As long as we're building to that vision, I think we've given the freedom to the people we've brought in to kind of make it their own, right? We're not like we don't have such strict rules on, well, we do this and this is what we do here. We're guided by that vision. And if we feel like there's something we can do really well to build towards that, then let's do that. We have our current vehicles, and we're not afraid to let other people come in and change some features to it, or change the direction it's going, or make modifications, make updates. I mean, these are things we want from our team. We're bringing talented people in. You have to let them be talented.
Yeah,
And
I
I
agree.
think that is maybe where other groups struggle, and so um, I think there's a lot of growth opportunities, and I think that's maybe what some of the current team members are attracted to. And again, don't get me wrong, we've fumbled and struggled along the way, and sometimes you lose track of, hey, wait a minute, let's sit back, look at this in the same lens we always do, because it's very easy to get tunnel vision. Like, well, why are we doing that? Why are we doing this? That's not what we're supposed to do. And it's like, wait a minute, what's our vision again? Is this supporting that vision? Have we tried it before? Does it make sense? Like those are questions we now ask, and let people run with that, right? So, mhm.
Yeah, so I love how you said it's questions we now ask, whereas before it was just like kind of malleable, and now it's like there's a little more form function to your
Mhm.
pillars and your expectations of what your business creates. So I think that's really interesting. I'm still in the
Yeah.
phase where I'm creating those pillars
Yep.
of what that business is. What I mean, everybody who works with me has an idea of where we're going and has a shared vision, but we're now developing those. Okay, well, what does this look like? Where are we going to go with it? What are these rules? And that's a really interesting place to be in. And I don't think that people realize that it's fine for the first handful of years not to have actual like structure and foundation if it's just like a handful of people. But when you realize as you've scaled, you have to have like some kind of structure. You can't just be like, hey, welcome. Do
Yes.
whatever you need to do.
Right.
Here, this is your
Right.
job. Figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, granted, I have people, and I'm sure that you did when you and your three partners were working together. Everybody knew what their responsibilities were. Like, they didn't have to. We
Hmm.
didn't have to talk about it. And then you're like, oh, we're going to bring somebody on. Well, we need to explain like
Yeah.
what that means for them, right?
Yes.
And
Well,
so,
and Stacy, to your point, this is a lot on brand too, right?
mhm,
Like, brand externally is important, but brand internally becomes
super.
increasingly more important. And we are in the process right now. We just finalized it. Lindsay Deneen is our director of marketing and engagement. She just came on board in June. She just took us through a brand exercise because you kind of have your ideation brand that's probably mostly externally focused, a little bit internally. Then you go through like your go-to-market brand, and then you have your commercialization brand. And we pretty much identified, hey, we did our go-to-market brand. It needs to be updated for our commercialization brand. Now let's have Lindsay come in and do that, right? And so we're going to be updating some of those things, kind of a brand refinement type of project. But one of the big things that I noticed during this exercise, there are things we need to update externally. Most of what we're updating is internally, right?
Interesting.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a really interesting process. Yeah.
Huh. I love that. I actually really
Hmm.
love that. So you guys always have stuff going on with Project MedTech. You were just in Europe for one of your symposiums, correct?
That's right.
Tell me a little bit about that. And are you going to do another one next year?
Yeah, by the time this airs, we will have done the Denmark event. We're heading there in 3 weeks at the time we're recording this. And yeah, we'll be back next year. I mean, so three different events we do. We have a Midwest showcase where we show off innovation in the Midwest, right? That is all about hospital systems, universities, innovation groups, accelerators, incubators, startups, strategics, you name it. That's what we want to showcase in the Midwest. There's a lot of really cool innovation going on here. Um, and I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Ohio. So then we have our Coming to America event, much smaller. We're talking like 50 people, 2-day course almost, and we're giving you information on how to set up your entity in the U.S., how to go through regulatory in the U.S., how is quality management systems different, and most importantly, going through commercialization, reimbursement, hospitals, how does it work, payers, how do clinicians think about things, right? It's going to be a great 2-day event, very small. How do you engage investors in the US, right? All of these things. But instead of being it focused on networking, 1-day course, like a typical event, it's much more of like a 2-day workshop, right? Yeah, they're going to take away where we're going to give them some of the templates we use, all of these things, and they'll have time one-on-one with different experts. It'll end up being like for every attendee an expert in a specific area, right? So it's going to be
Yeah,
a really cool course.
that sounds
So we'll
awesome.
we'll be in Denmark there for that. We'll definitely go back next year, and maybe we'll move it to a different location. And then we have our startup symposium in November, which you'll be speaking at. That's in Philadelphia, so people can still sign up if they go to our website. That is a 1-day taking you through ideation to exit. We'll have experts on stage for panels. There'll be investors there. There'll be a pitch competition. Um, we limit all of our events, like our Midwest Showcase and our Startup Symposium are generally between 2 and 300 people. So if there's someone you want to network with there, it's a very easy opportunity for you to do so. If you hear Stacy talk and you're like, you go to like a bigger event and someone talks and you're like, oh, I want to go talk to them, and you're waiting in line for like 20 people. If you see Stacy talking, you're like, I got to talk about human factors. I promise there'll be time to catch her at that conference because there's not as many people there. So that'll be a really fun event, and we've
Yeah,
done it
we're
in
excited.
Houston for 3 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So why did you change it from Houston to? Am I just getting them confused? Am I
No,
getting
no,
them
we
confused?
well, we
We did.
went from Houston to Philadelphia. Yeah,
Yeah.
so we did Houston for 3 years, and it was awesome for 3 years. So we just decided to switch it to try a different place and figured, there's when you do these events, there's a lot of local support, but there's also a lot of people coming in for it. And so with the Midwest Showcase, it's very um, you know, local and local adjacent states. With this event, people are coming in, so we still have to pick a city that's going to be easy to get to by flight, which Philly is.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's a great
yeah,
town. I'm excited to go. Like, I really like
yeah.
Philadelphia.
They've
Yeah.
got great. They have great med tech. They have great biotech. It's a good life science ecosystem, and so that's also what we're trying to pick is like a maybe not a tier one when you think of it. Like, everyone thinks of Boston, San Francisco, San Diego, but, we liked Houston because it was a tier two, making itself a tier one. The Texas Medical Center for Innovation there, Texas Medical Center there. Philly's the same way, University City Science Center. There's a lot of universities there, U of Penn. It's just a good area where there's a lot of innovation going on.
Yeah, no, I like targeting mid-sized to startup companies, like personally. I mean, you can work with the big boys and they're super fun to work with, but they have like a really long waiting line to get like a master
That's right.
service agreement agreed, which is an MSA for people who don't know what that is. And it just takes a long time to get in with these bigger businesses. And I just kind of like the flow of like medium-sized and smaller businesses because they
Mhm.
actually need more fractionalized workers anyways. Like if you're going into big tech or big med tech, like the things that they need are usually very prescribed. There's not a lot of leeway. There's very tight timelines, and they make you be superhuman in consulting rather than like, I just remember when I worked at Medtronic, we had like a month and a half to complete reports. When I have consulted for them in the past, it's like, you've got 2 weeks after the research to do the report. I'm like, you're insane. And they want
Yeah.
like updates every day. And I'm like, when I worked here, you didn't even ask me for this. Okay. Like, what is
That's
going
right.
on here, people?
Yeah.
So it's just
Yeah.
like, those are different markets. And I really like that midstream market a lot. I really do. It's more malleable and I think a little bit more fun, but that's just me. Cause like things aren't as, once you get into these bigger, larger corporations, those things are very like by the book and buttoned up. But back to you and Project Medtech. So you've got quite a few symposiums coming. You also have your Project Medtech podcast that you do 2 interviews a month, I believe.
We try to do them weekly.
Weekly. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
My bad.
Yep.
Yeah, weekly.
Yeah.
So tell everybody where they can find you, your website, your
Yeah.
podcast, where you're available, all the things.
Yeah. Yeah. So projectmedtech.com is a good place to start. That's where you'll have the events. You can get the podcast there. Actually, if you're looking for specific topics of the podcast, you can keyword search on our website within the podcast section. You cannot do that on Apple, Spotify, or any major podcast platform, which is really interesting that hasn't been incorporated yet. But for us, we have 230 plus episodes of the podcast. So if you want to like search human factors, you can go in there and type in human factors, and all the episodes in which we've talked about human factors will kind of pop up there.
That's great.
So that's a good spot to go. I would say that's the best spot. You can also see the consulting services there as well. You can get a feel for what we do, the team, that sort of thing. The podcast can be found anywhere podcasts are found. And yeah, we have a strong following and presence on LinkedIn as well. And so if you don't want to miss things, that's a good spot to follow us and, make a connection with me, message me. I'm always pretty active on there and happy to chat.
Awesome. Duane, thank you so much. I just learned so much from you today and I didn't even know I was going to. So like, I was like, oh, I need to do that. And I need to think about that too. And okay. Now I feel so overwhelmed, but it's always great. It's always a great conversation. It's
Yeah.
always a great perspective. And that's also one of the things that, Project MedTech brings to the table for startups is different perspective, different way of thinking about things and different, people that can help you execute to those things. So Duane, thank you so much.